Today's guest on Now and Zen is Steve Müeske. The first thing we do is explain how to pronounce his name.
When I was little, I used to say, pretend you've got a teacher and her name is Miss Key, and then change the accents.
Yeah, perfect. And so then does that mean that your alter name is Müesk?
No, that's actually kind of a long story. When I was growing up, well, I don't use that identity anymore, but everyone called me the Muesk because they thought my last name was Mueske. Um, and for a long time, I hated that. And then finally, at one point, I said, you know what? I'm just going to reclaim this. And for a long time, yeah, I released as Muesk, which is why I put the umlaut on there too to kind of accentuate that.
I see. How'd you get interested in microtonal music?
Wow. I'm not even really sure. But Sean Sevish used to have this label called Split Notes, and I'm not even sure how I stumbled on it. But some of the early releases included Skix, who I now know as Bruce Hamilton, and he's been a tremendous friend. Went back through and downloaded a ton of Sean's early work, even before he was Sevish. Yeah, so I just and then found City of the Asleep. Um, so I just kind of stumbled into it and really I'm like, what is this stuff? It's got so many different shades and emotions, and I was a little bit leery of, trying my hand at it, but I just out of curiosity, I downloaded the Scala program and I converted a bunch of SCR files into tune files and just started messing around with it. And yeah, there was a period, I think, somewhere like 2014 to 2017 or something, where I did that exclusively. Um, that's not the case anymore, but yeah, I was really, really intrigued by it just because it was so different and I didn't know anything about it.
So it immediately kind of grabbed your ear and you were hooked because you noticed.
So different.
So you knew Sevish before he was Sevish. What was that like on the internet?
Well, I didn't know him personally. I mean, we, would email and occasionally message and whatnot. Um, I just thought he was super intelligent, wrote this cool music. He had this label, and he was kind of at that time, it was a similar spirit in which we just, created music and just released it for free to whoever wanted to listen to it. So I really dig the ethos of the label and just what he was doing. And
I think his ideas have aged really well as time has gone on. Not just the music, but his attitude towards releasing it and almost curating it. I think in a sense with the music that goes on to Split Notes.
yeah.
Are your drum timbres influenced by him or other musicians at all? I noticed just how it's mixed really well and it's kind of like dark and brooding and it definitely has its own sound that I think is really unique, so I'm really curious as to where that comes from as well.
I wouldn't say that there's very much similarity between his work with drum sounds and mine. He's got kind of a jungle thing going on, which I absolutely love, but it's totally not what I'm doing. Um, and as far as like rhythm, wow, that could be a whole several hour conversation right there.
Yes.
I use quite a wide variety of tools, but early on, I was using a product called Guru from F Expansion, and they that eventually grew into Geist One and then Geist Two. I use Geist Two quite a bit now, and I also use Battery. I love like drum production stuff. Um, so there's not any one program that I use. Well, and a lot of times too, what I'll do is generate stuff and cut it up and load it into a sampler such as Battery or Contact or Halion and trigger it that way. So
How can you use sampling to alter your drum sounds significantly?
well, there's a a lot of different things. I mean, you can sample phrases and play the entire phrase. You can like sample sounds and detune them. You can mess with the attack and the release. Once it's in the sampler, I mean, you can pretty much do anything with it. I don't always use a sampler. Sometimes I go directly to an audio editor and do the, manipulate the raw wave files. But once it's out of its native, and well, the benefit to having something in its native environment is you've got often sequencing capabilities and stuff like that. But the benefit of taking it out of its native environment, putting it somewhere else, is that you have to reconceptualize the sound, and you're pretty much free to do whatever you want at that point.
Yeah. Let's neat stuff. So you talked a little bit about the programs you like to use for drums. I'm also greatly curious about the programs you like to use for synthesizers for retuning, since that's something that is well documented by microtonalists, I would say, but it's often difficult to find the right solution.
Yeah, and that's been an interesting evolution as well because in the early days, before there were 64-bit, all the synthesizers were 32-bit, and I was using Zeta 2. That eventually did become a 64-bit, but a lot of the early synthesizers I was using either stopped being supported or, in the case of like Alchemy, got bought by Apple and became a native program for Apple users. Now there's much more variety in terms of what's available. My go-to synth these days is Pigments 3, which I absolutely love, but I still use Contact for retuning. Lately I've been using UVI Falcon, although that one is kind of weird the way it distributes the notes in the tune files, because it's still set up for 12 notes. So when you pull in a tune file, it just distributes, the tuning information. And that, I mean, you still have the spread, but it does things like doubling notes and skipping notes and things like that, which can be unpredictable.
Oh no.
But in the end, I don't really necessarily care. All I'm caring about is what it sounds like.
Right, yeah. So would you say there are huge differences in how those different synthesizers handle tuning files?
Yes. And I attribute that sometimes to the synth and sometimes to, if you're creating, like, say, a sample library of a piano or a saxophone or whatever, um, that it's got a specific relationship to like what note plays what sample. And sometimes when you like in, Omnisphere is pretty good about tune files, but every once in a while you'll get you'll play a scale or something in an altered tuning, and it will, like, even side by side notes will jump an octave or do things that are unpredictable, and it's hard to tell. I mean, each synth definitely has its own personality for sure.
I've noticed that with Lumitone and Piano Tech, and I'm not sure why it's happening actually, where sometimes I'll uh just do a linear mapping for Piano Tech and then plug things into the Lumitone, and then I've got like mostly normal notes across the interface, and then when I play like something in a high octave, the notes that should be in their respective octave instead sound like they are an octave down. So I don't know if it's one of those weird little quirks or if there's some number that I have to set to be another number, but it totally works with other synths that I have that aren't piano tech. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a weird thing or anything, but yeah.
You never know. There's a lot of voodoo involved with this sometimes.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your piano sounds too, because I don't know if I'm desensitized or not. I mean, I am desensitized, but I like to think that I can access that part of my brain that was like pre-Zen, and that I kind of know what that's like, but I think it's kind of hard for me. I don't know. Like, you get over that initial feeling of shock from hearing colorful harmony or melody, and then it becomes about the surprise factor, I think. But The reason I mention that is because piano sounds, I feel like they have to be prepared in a really special way, and so I'm trying to get away with playing piano sounds in 15 tone equal temperament in a way that is not like, offensive for too out of tune to the average person, and so you have to use like just the right reverberance. And so I heard your song that used 15 tone piano on the newest album that you released, or is it an EP? And I was inspired. I heard it and I was like, there's no way this is 15 tet. I'm not hearing any rough fifths or
Hmm.
anything that would suggest that would count as like a wolf or anything.
Well, what I can say about that one, and I was going to dig that out and look at the the tuning information. I did pull in a 15 Ito tune file, and like I said, UVI does some weird stuff with it, so
Mm,
it's definitely not 12, but I'm not sure how much the 15 translates to 12 with that piano sound. It's from a library called Augmented Piano. When I use the same tune file on other, like I tried it on the cello, but I didn't like the cello sound at all, which is why I chose to do that part of the song in 12, and it just detuned it by ear until I could make it fit in with what I was doing with the piano. But what I was most interested in on that particular piece was trying to capture a sound like it was recorded to tape like 30, 40 years ago, and it was just dug out of somebody's reel to reel.
right.
And so I did a couple of things on that, but the major thing I did was use a tape echo and then modulated the feedback on it with a random modulator in Bitwig. So, I mean, initially when I did the first couple of passes, it wasn't random. It was just I was just using an LFO, and it sounded too regular. Like it was a cool sound, but it was too regular. But once I introduced that randomness to the modulator, it really produced the effect I was looking for. And I think that effect probably smooths some of the weirdness out of it also.
Yeah. So what program was that then that you were using the tape effect on?
Well, the DAW was Bitwig. The synth was UVI Falcon, and the library was Augmented Piano.
Well, I think it's really valuable to have these kinds of conversations about how one can use effects to mitigate certain microtonal features that a newcomer may find unpleasant. Um, and I feel like you and Sean especially have this like great talent to take just like the weirdest tuning ever and make it sound like really, really palatable immediately. Like I was listening to one of your tracks, I think on EXT, and I didn't. It was really modal sounding, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a cool scale. I wonder if there's something like Phrygian going on." And it was 9 EDO, and I was just shocked. I was like, "There's no way." It's good stuff.
Thank
Do
you so
you?
much.
Yeah, of course. Um, would you say you primarily compose in equal temperaments?
Yes. There have been a few exceptions. I did work in the what's called the golden ratio, um, 11 notes, and I think it's like 833 point, I don't know, 06 or something, and that was divided into 11 steps. Um, I did do a piece that used a double bowl and pierce. So I have done a couple things outside, but I'm not well versed enough in microtonality to really make solid judgments. Uh, Basically, what I do when I have like an urge to create a microtonal piece, and I will just go through various patches. I'll try different tunings until I get this feeling like, yeah, this is where I want to start, and that's kind of where the adventure begins. So yeah.
Yeah. It's neat to hear how that process, I think there's kind of like two ways that people approach that. Like some people sort of like have a tuning in mind and they like want to use the tuning for a particular reason. And then sometimes you have a situation where it's like discovering the tuning as part of just like messing around with the synth and like
Yeah,
finding this thing that you want to sort of like live in and create in and see where it goes from there.
and I totally get both approaches because I absolutely love 11 and
Yes.
17. And I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, okay, let's do this in 11 or let's do this in 17 or whatever. But when I did The Problem of Evil, which is in 14, that was first released on EXT, and I recently re-released it as Pentachrist 3. I think it was the last one, not the new one. Yeah, that was in 14. And the overwhelming sense I got working with 14 was this sense of evil. And it was very difficult to like find chords that worked, or and so I kind of went with the feeling and just kept pushing at it, pushing at it. And then when I got to the part at the end, that was all improv. I was deep enough into 14 where just that super evil dark was easy to come out, but it wasn't until I had been messing around with it for a while that I really understood what was going on with it.
Right, you had to kind of like tease it out after a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, neat. I seem to notice, I think that you really like a 11 tone, the equal temperament.
I do. I don't know why. It just sounds so beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's a really fantastic tuning. I think you get a lot of the like if you're using the machine 6 scale or whatever, like the one that is kind of like a whole tone scale, but one of the steps is different, or like a major scale where you only have one half step. Um that definitely has kind of like a dreamy but also sort of a tonal sound as well. Um do you have
Well,
any
and I love the work too in 22 that that Sevish has done, and of course the absolute master at 22 is Brendan Burns. Uh, I don't think that he's ever released anything I haven't liked, and usually my jaw's on the floor. I mean,
yeah,
he's an absolute master at 22.
11 as half of 22, like as a compositional device, is surprisingly rare. I want to say I've encountered it once, other than in my own work. There is one song that I have, like the very first song I released on SoundCloud. It got a bunch of plays. It was like this ode to microtonality that I sang at Ball State, and I wrote it only because on the Zen Harmonic Wiki, there was only one page that had chromatic notation for an equal temperament, and it was 22 tone equal temperament. So I was like, okay, I'll write something in 22 equal temperaments so I know how the notation works because I have the chromatic scale all listed out. And so there's this one point where like a big chord hits, and the rest of the song just has weird 22 EDO modes in it, but then that one hit is just the big chord that has all the notes of 11 EDO in it, and then it goes back to its thing. So but that's not really like a mode; it's more like a stabby effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I notice also that you've had some non-octave tunings as well, and I didn't know what all of them meant on EXT. I think I saw there was one that said like McLaren, and then another one that I also didn't understand. Let me see if I can.
The McLaren piece is an 11 note subset of 19, but the 11 notes aren't quite in 19, just in the way that like I use Zeus 22, which
Mhm.
is on one track, and that is like 22, but every other interval is a different size. So they're not evenly spaced like a normal 22 EDO would be. There's like a smaller second and a larger second, and they alternate back and forth. And so yeah, that one I discovered by accident, but that was a lot of fun also.
Yeah, that's so it's an unequal scale that is slightly irregular as
Yeah,
well. That's also not really 19 tone equal temperament, but maybe would you say it would count as like a 19 tone well temperament if you were to like fill it out? Like how close are the notes?
I would have to pull open the tune file and look at the information. That's one of the things I do early on, and then I don't think about it after that. But yeah, it's um, in the way that like some of the Wilson scales and stuff are there. I mean, it's still the same number. It's just that the intervals inside are slightly tempered.
I see there's Alethea has 11 equal divisions of phi. That's interesting.
That was the golden ratio one I was talking about.
Oh, yeah, because phi is the golden ratio.
Yep.
So
That
is it
one that one was difficult because I actually had to cheat a little bit on that one. It's difficult because it's there's no repeating octaves. So, and Sevish and I talked about this privately. Sometimes, if you're looking for a bass and you really have two options. I mean, you can just fudge around until you find something that works, or you can say, okay, for this particular sound, I'm just going to make this two octaves lower or an octave lower of what's going on elsewhere. And so that, for those pieces, you have to go into the synth and retune where it's starting from.
Yeah, I
I
wonder
don't know if
if
I've been terribly clear on that, but I guess what I'm saying is there are, like in a temperament like that, you're not going to hit it's non-octave, so you
right.
can't get the typical separation you'd have, like say with a bass and a pad and a lead. The exception in that particular piece is I had to fudge the bass. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that is totally clear, and we've mentioned Bull and Pierce before on the podcast as well. So I think our listeners are probably fairly familiar with the concept. You know, us talking about this just gave me an idea. I wonder if there could be some kind of tuning label for like for adding your own octaves versus not adding them. Like I feel like maybe that would be because maybe then the tuning people would be like, oh, I don't know. I feel like there's a fairly lax attitude towards like cheating to add in bass notes that are octaves among music makers, and then the theorists maybe are more the ones who would have an issue with that.
In the end, I mean, here's the thing for me. All I care about is what something sounds like, and that's why I've kind of described myself as a tourist, because I'm not really a purist in the sense I'm not really as deep into the community as a lot of people are, and I totally respect them. But that's also why I don't write microtonal music exclusively either. I'm really after like emotions and stories, and I'm more into the production and the feeling of something. And
Yeah,
I use microtonality, to get at that sometimes. So
yeah,
that's kind of where my piece fits in.
absolutely. And I think that's it's really healthy to have that balance actually. And like personally in my own life, I wish I could want to use 12 tone more, but I just don't cuz I'm over this hump where I'm like, wow, if I just stayed in 12 tone, things would be really cool. But like just pepper in a little bit of microtonality here and there.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Well, I
say.
still love 12 tone. It's yeah.
Yeah. I love 12 tone too. 12 tone is great. I just feel like there's so like it's so hard to come up with a chord progression that's like really really like groundbreakingly original. Like you hear it and you're just like, "Wow, I've never heard anything like that." Like I never get that feeling in 12 tone. But in microtonality I get that feeling all the time, and if I don't get that feeling in microtonality, I can conjure it.
Yes. And it's interesting. I sort of anticipated that we would take this turn. But one of the nice things that you can, like, if you stop thinking about 12 as 12 and you start thinking about like sounds, um, like more in a music concrete sense,
Mhm.
it stops being like I have to write a song and more like writing some sort of oral experience. So you can, yeah, I mean, it's still wide open. It's just because sound is sound. Um, yeah,
That is a really excellent point. And I think that there's sometimes people get stuck in writing songs and don't realize that if they make something a sound, then a person doesn't have to be listening in for melody and harmony and can just kind of like enjoy it as is.
yeah.
I wonder if you have any advice for younger microtonal musicians who are just starting out in terms of music production?
I'm not sure that I have a good answer for that, but I can tell you that I've spent a lot of time, just from a personal philosophy standpoint, um, and that the music has to have some degree of flaw to it. Some of the timing has to be off. I mean, not in a major way, but so I relentlessly listen to various sections, and I'll move the velocity levels around. I will change, the start and end time of the note. And I do all that stuff by hand, trying to get away from like the thing itself and get more into like how it would be performed if there were an actual person playing the part. So I do that relentlessly, no matter what song that I'm working on, because we're I think beauty comes from flaw. I mean, it can't be too. The flaws can't be so egregious that they stand out, but there has to be enough where it creates like a breath. Um, and when music breathes, you can definitely hear the difference between that music and something that's just put together. Oh, I'm going to do a 1 6 1 4 5 1 progression or whatever. Because if you haven't taken some time to consider the performance aspect, even of something such a simple progression as that, it's going to sound sterile and plastic. So if you spend an extra 10 or 15 minutes and listen to, okay, why does this sound sterile and plastic? You know?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Moving the velocity around, and I wonder, there have been a few times when I try to use tools to like randomize the velocity, so I didn't have to drag it around myself, and it definitely didn't sound like a human moved it around. Like there's definitely something about person going in and changing that makes it sound more realistic and more, like how a human would do it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some, and to me, that's what, will set one producer apart from another producer is how they approach the little details like that. And for me, I always think of like the sound as a painting. And I feel like if I don't, get up to my elbows in mud, in every last aspect of the sound, then I'm really not doing the artistic part of it. And to me, that's the most fulfilling is getting in there and seeing what's going on. It's like sometimes you gotta, change the way you pan things. And I mean, even just making a small adjustment panning affects the perceived volume of something, and then you've got to pull 4 or 5. It's like the sweater thing with the threads. Then you've got to pull 4 or 5 other things and make them fit, and sometimes it's a fight, but that's where the for me that is where it's at. I absolutely love it's some kind of weird like primal, I can't even describe it. It's just a way of getting in there. It's like you have literally control over every aspect of that sound.
Yeah, it's exciting. Um, I wonder if you have any thoughts about AI changing that kind of environment.
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of like personal difficulty with where AI is going. Personally, I think AI can be useful if it's a tool that you employ like you would any other tool. I think it becomes dangerous when AI becomes a substitute for like genuine creativity. Uh, and I don't really have an answer for that other than I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens. I think things, particularly in the next 2 to 3 years, are going to be, revolutionized, particularly from a tool standpoint. You see every product coming out these days assisted by AI technology, and great. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I think your feelings are very similar to mine. I tend to doubt or wonder whether AI will. I mean, of course, AI will be doing things with microtonality, but you have. I don't know. Things are changing in a positive way where, like, at first people didn't take any kind of microtonality seriously. And now music students, I think, probably at least have to grudgingly know about it, even if they're not interested themselves. So there's that exposure that wasn't there before. And sometimes tuning will get excluded from a perfectly legitimate conversation where it's supposed to be in just because of, where 12 is. Um, and so I don't know if like AI makers are aware enough about microtonality that they would consider for it in models of how it learns or not, or if they would kind of like have a really strong 12 tet bias and then anything microtonal, there's just no intuition at all. But I feel like you could extrapolate intuitions about microtonal tuning and how it could work structurally from things in 12, depending on the tuning system. There's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot of ways to go with that as well.
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to open the hugest can of worms there, but
No. That's just a multifaceted question.
yeah, I've been dying to talk about AI with somebody, but I don't know where to begin it. It makes me feel like an old person, and with everything I do, it hasn't been relevant to me lately, so I'm just trying to not use it because I'm putting off the act of answering lots of questions, maybe. I don't know. But yeah. I also wanted to ask about the labels here. What's the difference between like the Pentachrist project and the previous umlaut inspired nickname?
Oh my God, this is a major topic. I'm not even sure where to start with it. Before I was doing electronic music in the late '80s, early '90s, I was writing and performing progressive metal. Then I did the whole college thing, got married, and I really wanted to get back into music. And the one form of music that I didn't know anything about, that ironically enough I could do because I didn't have to worry about other musicians, was electronic music. So I took about 20 years working exclusively with electronic music. Then it came to a point where I'm like, I kind of want to play guitar again. That was about 3 years ago. But there really wasn't a place for it in the music I was doing. Initially, when I came up with the concept, it was to like create a hybrid form of music that was metal, electronic, ambient. And as I get further along in this project, it's kind of hard to do because I haven't developed it enough. So what I settled on doing was doing these bi-monthly releases where I kind of do a snapshot of where I am from a production standpoint and also bring in a couple pieces from my past. I'm going to be doing some more metal, like on the next release is going to be another really heavy one. But as far as the name goes, that is like a kind of a quasi spiritual thing. That might be a can of worms for a lot of people, but it's my honest engagement with like whatever like world exists beyond um, like what I see and experience, and sort of that engagement, along with the personal struggle that I have between doing like dark things and wanting to press into like more introspective and more um I don't know, more like more spiritually valuable stuff. And so that name to me signifies like the individual versus like whatever the eternal might be, and sort of that kind of conflict between the self and other.
It's
I
very
guess.
poetic and very metal also, you know, and biblical
Yeah.
imagery.
And now everybody's probably thinking I'm a nut job, but I am. So there's that.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Is there one and two? Um, I see you sent me three and four, but I didn't know if there was one and two, like for Pentachrist.
There is, yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
The very first one I just decided to put out last December, and it was kind of like the stuff I was doing while I thought about other stuff. And so it was ambient. And then the second release was the metal stuff I'd been working on for like a year and a half already.
Mhm.
So I am keeping to this 2 month release thing. but there's a lot of stuff that I've been working on for a long time that's in various stages of development. And part of this project is for me to like make decisions quicker than I normally would, and to say, okay, you got this deadline coming up, what's going to go on it? And so that increased like level of awareness and pressure, I've been finding pretty valuable. So there's so many people in the field that I really, really respect. Fast, for example, is, and there's so many good people that I talk to, and will just go the extra mile to, be friends and communicate. It's a wonderful community.
Yeah, it really is. It's very online, but not in a bad way. It's like in a thoughtful way. It's almost, I mean, that's how I feel about it. Is I was almost like, I don't know. I feel like the microtonality inspires thoughtfulness because it's so rare, and like, so we have to make everything precious and provide real commentary and network, and well, not network, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's a form of networking.
Yeah, it's funny because I've always just hated like the idea of networking so much.
I
Uh,
know, right? The
but
necessary evil.
right, but with microtonality, it's totally different, I feel like. Or maybe it's different in any circumstance where like it isn't obvious that you're just in a situation to like climb up the corporate ladder, which is so
Exactly.
which is so mediocre. But this
Because
is
there
more
is
like
no
a,
summit.
yeah,
Nobody.
right. There's no summit, and the summit is being terrible to people below you. So it's just awful. But this is collaboration. This
Yeah.
is thoughtfulness. This is education. This is diversity. It's so different. It's so much better. So it doesn't feel like networking, but with the podcast, I accidentally have networked myself into knowing a lot of people, which is kind of amazing, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Well, what you do is really valuable.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I try really hard to make it valuable. I didn't know that it would be the thing it is. And then I just kind of like stuck with it. And then eventually people started like, people will email in and send in recommendations and have other ideas. And so I think I really have to give a lot of credit to Sean, obviously, since he started the thing with me. The two really absolutely amazing things he's done. The first, of course, is to have the idea to do it. I'm not even like a podcast guy. Like, I don't listen to podcasts almost ever. I do listen to a lot of like silly YouTube videos, which is close to the same but shorter. It's kind of like the same thing, but um, you know, so he had the idea to do that, and then he also like started everything up so that it's all like working, and it's on Libsyn, and it's hosted, and the episodes go to the various places. And I wouldn't know how to do that at all,
Well,
and might
Sean's
not even
contribution
try.
to the whole community, like I can't think of a place where he hasn't had his fingers. I mean, he's incredible. I
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely insane just how much he's pioneered and what he's done and the ideas he has, not just his music, because like I feel like he's inspired an entire generation. All the young kids that hear electronic music now on YouTube that's microtonal. Sevish is just this he's just the starting point for so many. He's the starting point for
Mhm.
me. And then he's also done like Scale Workshop, which is a really amazing thing that you can just go on your computer and punch in a scale, and there you go, microtonal scale, no synthesizer necessary. And his blog posts have so much valuable information. Like, it's absolutely nuts how much that guy contributes. It's
Yeah.
inspiring. Yeah.
And a shout out to Bruce too. He's my God, Bruce Hamilton is such a godsend.
Yes. Oh, he's wonderful. I really love the music he's been making with Jostaberry
Oh yeah.
lately. He's really talented. Yeah.
Winning people over to music in general is a tough sell, just
Yes.
because they want, the 3-minute songs with the vocals and the verse and the chorus. So
Hmm.
just getting people to even think of like more exploratory and experimental music is a tough sell. But I think it's always been that way. When you look back in the 50s and 60s, and a lot of electronic pioneers literally had to create their own, method of doing it. And that's how it was born. So I think it's always going to be there. But I am so grateful that it's expanding and people are talking and thinking about these things. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the best part is, the way the younger generations are getting a hold of it, it's like turning people away from premature selected disgust faster. Like I don't know what it is, but I think there's lots of people who are quite set on thinking that microtonality is terrible. And
Yeah.
as I talked about with Brian on the last episode, like, we're just two people who have never thought that way. So I don't really understand like where that instinct comes from. But there's lots of people who will create something really cool and put it online that's short, and then someone will see that, and they might change their mind. So, well, thanks so much for coming on. This has been Steve Müeske.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Now and Zen. Be sure to check out Steve's latest project on Bandcamp, Pentachrist, releasing music regularly. You can also look at his past catalog through Müesk, which is spelled M-U with an umlaut, E-S-K, and past work under Steve Müeske. You can also check out his poetry through Googling. Thanks for listening to Now and Zen, the podcast about microtonal and Zen harmonic music. Our next episode, released tomorrow, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, will feature Brock Benzel. And our bonus episode for this month will feature Here Between the Lines, discussing their new album. Very exciting. Thanks so much to our listeners, as well as our Zen Harmonic patrons and our Zen Harmonic gods, Naren Rattan, Mike Battaglia, Adam Fries, Matthew Sheeran, Vincenzo Sicarella, Hector McGuffin, Christopher Bailey, Leland O. Weigel, Amy Coleman, Joel Weigel, and Tina Harmon Carto. Catch you next time on Now and Zen.